Hello, BookTube, and welcome to our final installment of our February read-along of Anthony Trollope's novel, The Eustace Diamonds. We are in 2019 going to read all of the Palliser novels, and this is the third one. This is the third one in the Palliser or parliamentary novels that Trollope never envisioned as a real sequence. He just set them in the same extended fictional world, involving a lot of the same characters. And this is something of an exception to that plan, because this is mostly a sensational story about a fantastically expensive diamond necklace, the Eustace diamonds, and Lizzie Eustace, formerly Lizzie Grace, the scheming Becky Sharp-like lizard-like creature who comes into the possession of those diamonds, some kind of possession of those diamonds. She is briefly married to Sir Florian Eustace, who is at the time the head of the title bearer of the Eustace family. And while they're on their honeymoon, he quickly comes, Trollope tells us he quickly comes to realize what she is, and it's not good. Trollope doesn't like her at all, and he doesn't want us to like her either. But he dies. He promptly dies. She marries him even though he's consumptive, and he dies. And when she reappears in civil society, she is extremely, as these chapters we're reading today put it, she's extremely well set up. She has Portray Castle, the Eustace home in Scotland, for her use for the rest of her life. And she's the mother of the heir. She comes back with a child. So, it's his as well. And she has also the rights and revenues of Portray Castle. That's money coming in. Plus, Sir Florian leaves her with money as well, £4,000 or £5,000 to herself, which you would think would be enough. But she also has the Eustace diamonds, this string of diamonds that is valued at £10,000, a staggering amount of money, and she claims that her husband gave it to her, that he gave her that necklace. And Mr. Camperdown, the lawyer, the dogged lawyer for the Eustace family, says, no. The castle, fine, you can live there. Your rings and dresses and hats and whatnot, fine. But the Eustace diamonds belong to the Eustace family. They're not yours. They weren't his to give. In the early chapters that we read, it's pretty clear that one of Mr. Camperdown's, and by extension the Eustace family's, worries is that Lizzie will simply sell the diamonds, and that they'll be gone beyond reach of the family. She says early on in the book that she's already in debt. She barely has her money from the legal settlement before she's telling people she's already in debt, and we can well believe it. But even though she tenaciously holds on to the diamonds, Mr. Camperdown consults a legal expert called Mr. Dove, who Trollope starts to nickname as Turtle Dove. He says that people in London, in the literary circles in London, teasingly refer to this super serious legal expert as Turtle Dove behind his back, but then imperceptibly Trollope starts calling him that too, because Trollope doesn't like any of his main characters in this book, and he takes no pains to hide that fact. And when Mr. Camperdown consults with the Turtle Dove about the necklace, he gets an answer he doesn't like at all, which is that, no, this it could very well be that the husband gave these things to the wife. The people are often mistaken about heirlooms. These things are not heirlooms. The family has no claim to them. Isn't enough. It doesn't matter to Camperdown. He is dedicated from the very beginning, long before Sir Florian dies. As soon as Mr. Camperdown meets Lizzie Greystock, they are at war. They are mortal enemies. And as he puts it in the chapters that we're reading today, he knew that he must conquer her. But in a way, the Eustace diamonds conquer her first, because they bring her no peace. She herself is so untrustworthy that she is constantly attuned to the untrustworthiness of others. And they start to prey on her. As I mentioned in an earlier video, they prey on her much the way that the One Ring does on Gollum. They give her no peace by day or night. They occupy her thoughts all the time and wear her down, to the point where, when she has her cousin Frank up to the castle in Scotland, she tells him, maybe semi-seriously, that she's often tempted to just throw them into the ocean, and she offers them to him. He doesn't believe it. even now, even at the end of the book, he says, well, that was obviously a joke. She swears it wasn't, and we don't know. We don't know. I don't myself believe for a minute that Lizzie Greystock would do either of those things. Her stubbornness in holding on to them seems to me to be her defining characteristic, and it doesn't do her any good. She has a safe, a portable safe that she can lock them in. But when she decides to travel back to London from Scotland, she is so worried about all the talk she's heard from the low-life demimonde with which she surrounded herself that the safe could simply be borne away, that someone could carry it away and force it open. The diamonds aren't safe, even though they're in the safe. She's so worried by thoughts like that when, on the way back to London, she is, in fact, robbed. Someone does, in fact, make off with the safe and does, in fact, force the door open. The police burst into her room. They wake her up. They startle her. They want to inform her of this crime. They want to ask her if she knows about any specifics, anyone who might be to blame. And she tells them the distraught picture of, well, no, well, oh my gosh, oh, well, this is horrible, oh, well, when the whole time the diamonds are under her pillow, because she never did put them in the safe. She ended up yielding to her fears and all that chatter from Lord George and a whole bunch of other low-life, seedy characters at Portray Castle. She finally yields to the worry of that and doesn't have the diamonds in the safe when the safe is stolen. The police think nothing, they take the information and just assume that the famous Eustace diamonds have been stolen. We, as readers, know that they weren't. Lizzie keeps them in her desk once she gets back to London. And she makes the mistake of telling this low-life character named Sir George that fact. And soon afterwards, the house is broken into when she's out. Her room is broken into. Her desk is broken into. And when she gets back, she knows perfectly well what is missing. The police, of course, consult. They talk about rings missing and a small amount of money missing. They have no idea that a £10,000 diamond necklace has also been stolen, because they thought that it was stolen on the way to London. They believed her original statement. And rumors start to spread right away all throughout London. One of the fun things about this book, one of the metafictional, if you will, elements of this book, is that Trollope shows us the rumors. He shows us that this is not only the subject of his book, but it's on everyone's tongues in London. No one can stop talking about the Eustace diamonds. In fact, one of the charming side characters here, the Duke of Omnium, the old Duke of Omnium, we get the distinct impression that hearing the latest gossip about the Eustace diamonds and Lizzie Eustace is keeping him alive. And we advert back to that over and over again. And in that glittering circle of people who are listening to that gossip are all the characters that we know and love. All the ones who were in the previous book and who will be in the next book and the book after that and the book after that. We barely get them at all in this book. And when we do, it's in that capacity that we go to their familiar haunts. We go to Matching Priory. We go to all these different places and see them talking over the story that we already know. It's a fascinating thing to do. It's a fascinating gambit on Trollope's part. I think it works really, really well. And it would, I think, have led naturally to letting those characters and that outside, that metafictional element, shoulder a little more of the book's narrative burden as the book goes on. And unfortunately, maybe you disagree. If you do, then you won't think it's unfortunate. I want to hear all about it. I think it's unfortunate that Trollope doesn't do that in this book. In the second half of this book, and especially in the quarter that we're reading today, he shifts that narrative burden instead to that demimonde of grubby, greedy, distrustful secondary characters, most of whom gather at Portray Castle or that Lizzie Eustace comes to know in London. And they can't bear it. They're funny in a slapstick Dickensian kind of way, but they can't bear the bulk of the book, as much of it as they're asked to do. We're all of a sudden following them into their own matrimonial scrapes and into their own scrubs for money or brushes with the law. And it makes for some chapters they're sparklingly told. Trollope is at the height of his storytelling powers throughout this book, but they tend to drag a little, because as much as we are willing to concede that, okay, this novel will not be about Lady Glencora Palliser and Madame Max and Lord Chiltern and Violet Effingham and the Duke of Omnium and Plantagenet Palliser, we might be willing, we are willing, from right away, I would argue from the first few chapters, we're willing to say, okay, this is just going to be adjacent to their world. We're not going to read any more of their adventures in this book. But Lizzie Eustace is so interesting, so entertaining, and the fight with the lawyers and the whole question of who has the diamonds and where they are is so interesting that we're willing to do that. We're willing to go along and learn her story, and we'll just check in with our old friends every once in a while when Trollope does. We're willing to do that, but we're not willing to go any further than that. We're not willing to go any farther away from Matching Priory than just one person. And instead, in this last bit, we get a lot of stuff about a lot of characters that we don't even ersatz care about. And I think that weakens the book a bit. Not much. It's still a tremendously fun read, because in the chapters that we're reading today, to finish out the Eustace Diamonds, the big question is, will Lizzie Eustace face the wrath of the law for having perjured herself? For having given the original false testimony to the police about the first robbery, knowing that it was false, knowing that the diamonds were under her pillow the whole time. Will she face penalty for that even when the thieves are caught? The second batch of thieves, the people who actually stole the diamond, even when the jeweler who actually received the diamond and the diamonds and chopped them up and disposed of them, even when all, in other words, of the principals of the crime are known and in custody. The question lingering over this last quarter of the book is, will Lizzie Eustace end up in custody? Will she be found guilty of perjury, put on trial, found guilty, that sort of thing? We don't think there's a great likelihood of it, and Trollope quickly dispenses with the possibility that anything like that will happen. He has a wonderful scene in the chapters that we're reading today where Lizzie Eustace actually goes to Mr. Camperdown's office. John Eustace, her cousin, the one of the Eustace family, is there in the room, and they have a brief but very pointed conversation in which Lizzie Eustace plays her hand perfectly, says, I didn't give a truthful account the first time because I was so flustered. What if you had a daughter who were in a similar situation? Would you expect her to be cold and calculating and factual the whole time? It doesn't. In that scene, Mr. Camperdown realizes that he has been bested. He still doesn't let it go. He's on her right to the end of the book, but he realizes in that scene that he cannot touch her. The law probably won't touch her. She probably will skate away scot-free, and she does. She goes to Scotland, and when there's a trial and she's called upon to be a witness at the trial, she refuses to appear, says she's really sick. She's thundered at by the lawyers, she's thundered at by the judge, but nothing comes of it, and nothing will. And we get a little bit of a sort of a postscript. The two relatively virtuous characters in the book, Frank Greystock and Lucy Morris, get married. Neither one of them is really shining by. No one gets out of this book clean as a whistle. Even Lady Glen. Lady Glen, when Lizzie Eustace is briefly the talk of London, takes her up. Tells people, in other words, she is an especial friend of mine. Takes up her cause. Even visits her a couple of times. And the fact that Lady Glen doesn't see or what Lizzie Eustace is, or sees and doesn't care, doesn't reflect well on her at all. So, but the peculiarity of this last quarter of the book is something that recurs over and over again in the novels of Trollope. And those of you who read a lot of his novels might notice it. Those of you who haven't will no doubt have noticed it this time around and will be thinking how strange it is, which is that the book comes to its climax roughly around the halfway point. and this last quarter that we're reading, 200 pages, is entirely anticlimax. It is entirely the sort of settling down of and tying up of loose ends. That's kind of amazing. It's kind of amazing that Trollope could pull that off, and he always does. He always does. In 9 times out of 10, when he has a novel like this one, where there are sensational plot questions involved, where it's not just a question of who will end up marrying who, but where there's some plot question. A character has gone missing. Is he dead? And which characters know where he is? A character forges a will or doesn't forge a will. A widow forges a document to make sure that her son inherits. And there's a question, a legal question, a factual question. 9 times out of 10, when Trollope has a plot like that, it's like he himself thinks Well, trying to maintain suspense right to the end doesn't really do it for me. I'm not that kind of writer. 9 times out of 10, he dispenses with that right in the middle of the book. Just has a character come right out and say, or says it himself, comes right out and says, well, I don't want the reader laboring under any kind of false suspense, so I'll just tell you right now, so-and-so is actually in Geneva, or whatever. And you're just astonished that a writer would do that. And you think, well, okay, then why do I need the rest of the book? You can't possibly hold my interest for the rest of the book if you've already revealed that. And he does every time. Not only does he hold your interest, but he makes you feel a little bit tawdry for ever having expected that he wouldn't. For ever having been, even for a moment, the kind of reader who needs that, who needs the last page reveal. It's a very adult kind of fiction. I love it more and more the more I read it. The more time I spend in Trollope's company in his novels, the better I like him as an author. And the main import for me this time around, reading this last quarter of the Eustace Diamonds, was two things. First one is what might have been if Lizzie Eustace had been a different kind of person. Now I realize that's kind of the whole shooting match, because if she were, there wouldn't be a book. But Sir George, he's not really a sir. He's kind of a scammer and a schemer. But at one point in these pages that we're reading today, he summarizes how he views Lizzie's life to her. Now, he's in the middle of a scam, and he has plenty of other scams involved. He's even toying with the idea of marrying her. And she's in the middle of scams as well. But I want you to listen to this description. He says that you should be able to keep the history of the diamonds a secret does not seem to me to be upon the cards. No doubt people who are rich and are connected with rich people and have great friends, who are what the world calls swells, have great advantages over their inferiors when they get into trouble. You are the widow of a baronet. You have an uncle, a bishop, and another a dean, and a countess for an aunt. You have a brother-in-law and a first cousin in Parliament, and your father was an admiral. The other day you were engaged to marry a peer. And he could add to that you're wealthy, you're young, you're beautiful, and you have a landed estate, a castle in Scotland. And the thing to remember about that description, even though it's offered as bitterness on Lord George's part, is that it's entirely true. All of that is true. And Lizzie Eustace immediately follows that up with a lie. She immediately says, Lady Glencora Palliser and the Duke of Omnium are dear and special friends of mine. Well, that's not true. She's a pet to Lady Glen, and she's not known at all to the Duke. But Sir George's description of her is true. Once Sir Florian has exit stage left on page 2 of the book, she is set up perfectly well for life. She's young, she's got a landed estate, rents, freedom, money, and the youth to enjoy it all. And it's not good enough. It's not good enough. And it's not just the Eustace diamonds. It's Lizzie Eustace herself. She cannot be content, even when she has a million things to be content with. Sir George has none of those things. A lot of the low-life characters that surround Lizzie Eustace in this last quarter of the book have nothing. Less than nothing. And for me, it highlighted that another character, or for instance, a normal person, someone who wasn't a character in a book, would have been content with being handed all of that for life. So that was one thing that struck me, is that it's repeated to us even at the end that all of the troubles that Lizzie Eustace had, she brought on herself. But the other thing that struck me this time around is we're pretty much finished with the plot of the novel. All sorts of loose ends are tied up at the end. But one of the things that struck me at the end this time around was when in that scene with Mr. Camperdown and John Eustace and Lizzie Eustace, and in scenes like it that are repeated throughout the last quarter of the book, characters say, well, why chase after this poor, dim-witted girl? So she had the necklace and refused to admit that she still kept it even when it seemed to be stolen. So she wanted to say that it was hers and that her husband gave it to her as her own property, and that even if there's some sort of legal question about whether or not that was true, so what? What difference does it make? The diamonds are gone now anyway, and there was no great harm done to anyone. So she lied about a little trinket of a necklace. So what? What difference does it make in the long run between whether or not Is it really worth dragging her to court and sending her, or as Mr. Camperdown dreams in these last pages, hauling her to London by cart ropes? What difference does it make? And to a certain extent, Trollope, I think, in these chapters seems to abet that. He seems to go along with that. That this is a tale of minor villainy and a petty, grasping, minor little character who, thinks for a minute that she can have her cake and eat it too, and is disabused of that notion, but no harm, no foul. And when I was reading those sentiments over and over again in this last quarter, I kept thinking, there's someone that Trollope has forgotten. There's a character that Trollope has forgotten, and that all the characters in the book forget. This character is not mentioned in the last quarter of the book. And it's maddening to me. The more I thought about it, the more it was maddening to me. There's one person in this book for whom the disappearance forever of the Eustace diamonds means an enormous amount. And that's Lizzie Eustace's son, the heir, the Eustace heir. If the Eustace diamonds belong to the Eustace family, then she has defrauded him. And even if they don't, they're still the Eustace diamonds, and he's still a Eustace. He is going to be Sir Florian. And no one seems to care or even remember that he exists. He's up in Scotland with a wet nurse. And that's it. That's all. And that drove me nuts this time around. It further adds to the perfidy of Lizzie Eustace, that she doesn't even care, doesn't even spare a thought for the patrimony of her own son. That was maddening. But by the end of the book, Trollope has the masterly decision to end the book with a bit of gossip, with a bit of that metafiction. He returns to the world of all of our old friends, the old Duke and Plantagenet Palliser, who says that in his 10-minute breaks from working, because he works all the time, that in his 10-minute breaks from working, he's moderately kept up with the story that's all made all of London abuzz, and the old Duke is chortling with the latest details, and Lady Glencora is, of course, caught in an awkward position, as her enthusiasms often land her, because she took up Lady Eustace as a special friend, but she can't be deaf to what all of the gossip is saying. And in that chapter, right at the end of the book, Lord Chiltern, who's a wild man, he's got fiery red hair, he was in a duel with our hero in the last book. He's a virtuous, he's a good, solid person, but he has a passionate temper, and he's a raw, ragged individual. I think a wonderful character of Trollope's part. And he says at one point that he's sick to death of Lizzie Eustace. He's sick to death of hearing about these Eustace diamonds. He says it's all I've heard about for 6 months. And he's corrected to 3 months, but you get the point. And it's daring of Trollope to have Lord Chiltern, who never tells a lie, and who is kind of an intuitive genius in most of the places where he appears, say that outright. But at the end of this book, that, I'm sick of this story. It was the toast of London for a little while, but it isn't worth it, and it doesn't mean anything. And that's the note on which we ring out the Eustace times, pretty much. It's one of the last things that's ever said on the subject. Lizzie Eustace will appear again. Trollope's not done with her, but this is her epic moment in the sun. This whole contretemps. The Eustace diamonds, the whole story of them. Trollope boils it down to a couple of sentences for synopsis in later books. He does that masterfully. He does that all the time with a lot of his books, where a scandal or a noteworthy event that took the whole of a book to tell will in a later book be reduced to one offhand comment. Oh, is she the one with the diamonds? Or something like that. And the reader's just supposed to know that, but now we have the story of the Eustace diamonds. And that brings us to the end of our Trollope read along for February. It was a lot of fun. We will get back to Trollope. We will be reading a lot of Trollope in 2019, but I wanted to stress we're not doing that next month. Next month, the read along will be Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, 15 chapters a week, starting next Sunday. So we will go from God only knows what Elizabeth Bennet would have made of Lizzie Eustace, but we'll go from this world to that world next time. So let me know what you thought. Those of you who followed along, those of you who read along and are now finished with the Eustace diamonds, let me know what you thought of this whole thing. I had a tremendous amount of fun reading it again, so I appreciate the opportunity. And we're going to have a lot of fun next month with Pride and Prejudice. So I'll wrap this up for now, but I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.